So hello and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I think we're going to call it the Popia podcast this week. That's what we're having. And it's Fern and Lydia and myself and Calvin. And we talk about all things social media and Christian ministry. Excuse me. What are we doing this week? What are we talking about this week, Lydia?
So this week, I think we want to explore the area of mental health and the church. Because it's actually partly for my assignment requirement, where I want to explore the area of how the church community actually plays a role in ensuring that we have a positive mental health overall.
That's great. So is it fair to say that it's talking about something that's personal, mental health, but also the effect that being in a community, being in a church, how that helps and how that helps us to grow in our mental wellness?
I think it's also being aware, there are behind the smiles of everyone, there's a lot of backstory that we will never know. And I think it's more aware of us to actually get in touch. Sometimes they might seem okay, but actually if you just ask them how are you doing, and then they will start to pour out nobody asked me about that, and they start crying out. So it's just that initiative to get in touch.
Yep. So again, you're doing this for your research project. You have a personal interest in it.
Yeah, so thankfully. So how did I actually discover, this mental health? I believe it most likely is a calling from God, because it started around 2019, and I seem to have very interested in mental health. I actually went for a suicide prevention talk before, and somehow as the police share about all the cases, what are the top reasons that people actually go for suicide? Firstly, it's always about relationships, and after that, the next is expectations from parents or close ones, and those are and I think these are actually preventable. Just that they never had that space to share it out on the space. And I think so after that, COVID came, and it became even more certain that how much mental health is so important. And I have a lot of people going through loneliness, domestic abuse, or nuisances around, and it hurts that they don't have a space where they can actually release. So and after that, so that's why thankfully because of that, of COVID, that I came to a point that, mental health is really important. Why are churches not doing anything about it? Not many, though. So
that's a very good place to start, because we've covered so many aspects of mental health, especially issues. And what I want to start with is something that's personal to us. So I'm going to ask each of us, what's our personal experience? Maybe you know someone of just dealing with that word mental health. I might start with you, Fern, if that's okay. Sorry, you're just about to start makaning.
It's okay. We can chat first. Yeah, we can chat first.
I think we need to be close.
Okay. Closer a bit. Hello.
Yeah.
Okay, so my personal experience with mental health. Well, actually, I studied psychology in uni, so that's my...
I didn't know that. Oh, really? Okay.
So my degree is actually in psychology.
Okay.
So I think really the whole study about behavior and emotions probably started really quite early for me. So technically high school, right? Since that was when you're making decisions about what you want to major in.
Okay. And you chose to go down this line of training, and you went to study this subject.
Very intentionally. And I think at that time when I wanted to study psychology, it was quite people were skeptical about it. People not so much my peers, but I think my parents, and they were like, "What's this?" I think the idea.
If you're not banker, lawyer, businessman,
lawyer, doctor, or failure, right? Anything else is failure. So accountant. So I think she ended up in the failure category, but no, she did not turn out to be a failure. Dude.
Amen, praise the Lord. But I think also it was perception what is this? Psychology, dealing with crazy people. Things that are very not the correct term, and I think it's just very much a lack of understanding. And I remember at the end of high school, that age 17, 18. the thought of going to therapy or even counseling, it's like, wow, why you got, what kind of problems do you have? You know, it must be like you going nuts or what, that you need to go and see a psychologist. So I came like that time when I decided to go to uni. That was, I felt like a lot of the sentiments around it, especially from maybe the older generation. Yeah, so through uni, obviously we had to do mandatory counseling hours. So I wasn't counseling because I was just like, I was doing only a bachelor's, but we had to go to the master students and let them counsel us. So I think that was like obviously my first
very practical.
Yeah, my first experience being counseled and seeing like an actual like counseling setting. But I didn't, I mean, the last podcast I said after uni I wanted to be a fashion photographer.
Yeah.
So I obviously, and I think that was maybe worse for my parents, like photography, oh no, like, it's like our daughter, yeah, what?
Psychology, photography.
You don't know which is worse, you know, sometimes. Yeah. But I knew that if I wanted to practice, especially like counseling, I would need to like continue my studies. I would need at least a master's. I didn't want to stay in the classroom anymore, and counseling on its own, I think at that time I wasn't very drawn to it. But yeah, anyway, so that was uni, and then actually during the pandemic, I really had a real timeline where I could focus on my mental health. And I think for me the opposite is that I know for a lot of people, like maybe they felt it was the pandemic that made them experience a lot of anxiety and all of that. But I think for me what happened was the pandemic, like suddenly having so many things cut out from my life, and I was home all the time. I realized that these existing issues were coming to the fore, so I could finally have that space and the time to be confronted by it. And
but you're speaking from a personal perspective.
Yeah. And I knew in a moment, like there were moments when I knew, like if I don't deal with some of these issues, and some of it I knew were like childhood trauma, it was trauma from relationships, trauma from friendships, trauma from school, trauma from everything. Like we collect, I think, a lot of traumatic experiences over our life, and I think trauma is actually very everyone has it. Has it, right? So I think at that point I realized, like, man, some of these things, if I don't deal with it, I don't even think I can do the next thing that God is calling me to.
It's very interesting that, you know, it wasn't the pandemic itself that caused the trauma, but it became the environment in which something that accumulated over time then manifested itself during the situation.
Yes. I think it was already manifesting, but because I was so busy, you can kind of tell yourself, like, it's almost like you deceive yourself into thinking because you're still functional, everything's fine, you know. But I think it was when everything was taken away, and then I was left, like, I really had to just confront these things in me, and then realizing, like, I think God's calling me also to the next thing. But if I don't deal with these issues, I don't think I can actually do what He has called me to.
Actually, what do you think of this? I mean, the connection between the pandemic and the rise. You know, you do see this kind of like rise in a kind of like a cry for help and a rise for a kind of like an acknowledgement that there are mental health issues.
I think it's sad that it has to go to this way that only people are aware, because mental health has always been there since I think definitely our parents, the boomers' age, just that they never had the space to speak it out.
That's an interesting perspective.
And they're being pushed down, you know, like, oh, you're too free, you know, to think about all this. You should be, if you keep yourself busy, then you won't be thinking of all this mental health problem. And it's more of like being suppressed. So then it was until a situation like COVID that it makes it, everyone boom, it's like, oh yeah, mental health is so important. Yeah. So
that's a very interesting perspective, and it makes sense.
It was there.
Yeah. Okay.
But good thing there are people who like Fern, she did find some new perspective of how she can overcome it, and it's good for some, bad but in my area, I'm thankfully, because I have a family, I still stay with my family, and we are, a healthy family does makes a difference to make it not so isolated, not so, you know, not so burdensome. But those who actually live alone, away from the parents, or those who are in a very unhealthy family, that's where they feel the pressure and all the burdens.
And there's that push and pull of either being alone or being in constant contact with your family, which happened during pandemic as well. So one can, I mean, both can either help or cause even more stress because of that kind of close contact.
Yeah.
But again, the pandemic brought out these issues,
it
which
will.
I guess were there, like you said, but they just never had the opportunity to kind of rise to the surface. So again, actually, maybe I just stick with you and ask you the same question. What is your personal contact with this issue of mental wellness and issues?
Well, thankfully, thankfully God blessed me with a healthy family, so I did not encounter much. But I do have people like friends, definitely. Did not say they survive well, in a way feeling lonely, but there's also people who actually go through tough life of how maybe one of a friend that even not really COVID related, it's more like how his wife met into an accident and then he got so angry with God, and then
Oh, that's so tragic. Oh my
so he
goodness.
got so
Okay.
angry with God, and that's where his faith is a bit shaken at times.
Okay.
And but I think thankfully the community was there for him. It's that pillar of support that always
Okay.
come and check in on him. And somehow, by the grace of God, somehow he spoke to him and said like, I can't be like this anymore. I can't be at this stage. And then he somehow, boom, awakened. And he overcome it. So sometimes it's just a divine, intervention that
Yeah.
heals someone.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I like the term mental health or wellness, because yes, you deal with issues. I mean, the broader subject of psychology is dealing with certain conditions that can be biological, but ultimately what you want to bring an individual towards is a kind of healthiness. We know when we feel healthy in our bodies, like after you exercise, and there's a certain kind of resilience that you can deal with a certain amount of stress physically. And I think mental wellness and mental health implies not just that you're happy, but that actually you're able to cope in different situations and maybe even challenging situations.
Yeah, I think healthy in a way that it's not just like think positive, distract myself, think positive.
Yes,
It's
not
always
that, yeah.
the area to express even the bad side of you,
yeah.
and being
Exactly.
safe,
Yeah.
not being judged, and
Yeah.
being heard basically. I mean heard, not hurt. So being heard by
Yeah,
someone,
exactly,
listened to,
yeah.
and to express it out. It's that balance of how we say, not we're going to call yin and yang, but it's just like that, to release and input.
Okay.
You need to release only you can have a new input in a way. Yeah.
It's interesting that when I asked you what was your personal contact, then you talked about someone who was going through a kind of challenging circumstances, but they were
Grief.
able to overcome it. And so for you, it's a relational story. I mean, it was someone that you knew, and you kind of like saw, it working out in this area of struggle. It's a circumstance, losing someone that they loved, but then also having to overcome an internal kind of like angst with God. Why did this happen? Yeah. Is that maybe why as well you're looking into community, that relational aspect?
Definitely. And I think just like that friend who actually go through, it was the community that kept him, they did not fall into the deeper end. It was a
Really,
community that kept him afloat. If it's without a community, I think he maybe already he left the church life and maybe, I don't know,
Okay.
being angry with God. But it was the church community that always kept him going, how are you doing, and all this thing, the
Yeah.
checking ins. Yeah. Thankfully, and he's still around in church.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's such an encouraging kind of like scenario and a real life story. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. My experience is fairly similar. So I lived in the UK, but I lived in low-cost housing. So meaning my neighbors would only be able to live in these flats if they were very poor, if they were formerly homeless. We had a few drug addicts as well, recovering. But also half the tenants were all very old. So it meant spending a lot of time speaking with people very slowly and making friends. But for me, the thing that comes to mind when I think about mental health is a few individuals, but one lady in particular whom I really grew to know very well. She was in her late 80s and she was brilliant. Her home was filled with books. And we were talking about India earlier on. You know, she spent her youth in India. She was this Ang Moh lady. She was actually, you can tell she was really stunningly beautiful in her youth. And she still was, you know, at 80 plus years old. And so she was really fun to talk to. But then very immediately, in a certain period of time, suddenly she degenerated. And she even forgot who I was. I mean, we knew each other for years. We had all these conversations, and she just couldn't recognize me at all. And it was still fun to talk to her, but you know, it's very heartbreaking because you could see she was kind of like a shadow of the person that she was. And a byproduct of that was that she would get anxious. You know, she would start seeing things, and she would start telling me things about, you know, things she was worried about. And I think, again, maybe these things were there, but it's just that there weren't any the mental safeguards there. And it was kind of tragic that in the end, you know, she had to be admitted to a home. Yeah, but to see that over a span of, I think, over 10 years, you know, it made me think that, you know, there are seasons in which we are maybe stronger than we are doing better. But also all of us, you know, just due to age, just to sometimes, you know, you feel better some days than others. You know, there are seasons in which we maybe need help. And I would like to think that just me speaking with her was a comforting thing. You know, we went to the pub. That's all we did sometimes. She just sat down there. Very cool.
Cool grandma.
Yeah, cool grandma. She just
cool.
wanted to go in and she wanted to watch rugby. Yeah, she loved rugby.
So young at heart, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, that was one of the things we did. Yeah.
But you say that she was living alone. She don't have anyone else.
Not just her, a lot of the elderly people were there. And because you can imagine, if she's like late 80s, her kids were in their 60s and 70s as well. And for her case, she had not a great relationship with her. Yeah. In fact, from what she described, her daughter had some serious mental struggles as well.
Right.
Yeah.
In the UK, is the mental health, I don't know, quite facilities are actually well established, or nobody knows her?
Wow. I'll say this for the church, actually. So I lived down the road from a church that actually founded an organization called Biblical Counseling. And you can look it up, Biblical Counseling UK. It is such an encouragement to me because they produce resources not just to help people dealing with various issues, but their aim is actually to train up, you know, people who are able to counsel within the context of the church.
That's good.
So Steve Mitchley, the one that you mentioned, so I knew him personally. I mean, he was a doctor in training, but and he was a brilliant pastor. But now he is kind of like stepped back to focus on this. And so I would say, I think yes, there's the medical aspect of there's a kind of framework in the UK called the NHS, which is fantastic. It covers very holistically, including mental health. But I think also together with that, you know, the church has a kind of community feel. You know, we lived in parishes. You know, there used to be a church. They'll look after a certain area, and very normal for that. And I think that kind of legacy and the kind of perspective whereby we look out for each other means that, you know, relationships. That's how you recognize issues with mental health, and also I think that's a great context to minister as well. Great question. Yeah. So very different personal encounters. Some, you know, through education, some through relationships. But now I want to talk about church and, you know, what kind of positive kind of like role the church can play, especially for people to either be ministered to or to minister to others in this area of mental health. So Christian ministries, or maybe even the church community itself. You look like you're thinking about something, so I'm going to ask you first.
Should be very careful about like my facial I think the first thing that came to mind when Calvin asked that question, like what can church do? Because it's such a big area, right? Mental health, and it's really an area that requires, I think, professionals as well to be working in it. It's not something that we can just go in and make assumptions about. But I think just the very basic like acknowledging that it is something that people struggle with would be very affirming already to some people.
Just acknowledging that.
Yeah, I think first step, like, okay, this is a real thing. People really are struggling. I mean, not being dismissive about it, not trying to be like, just pray more. Like, you know, God says this verse.
Yeah,
I have a verse for you.
You didn't have faith enough. You have to read more Bible and all these things.
I have a verse for you, that kind of thing. I think a lot of times, and you know, partly I can understand why we would respond that way. I think I've also responded that way before as well. And I think a lot of it is that because it's something we are unfamiliar with, we don't know how to deal with it. It's scary, it's awkward. So it's easier to just try and patch that. Since you're telling me that you're struggling, I don't know what to do. Okay, like here's a Bible verse, like let's pray together. You know, but I don't know how to kind of facilitate that conversation. And I think a lot of times, from my experience anyway, talking to people and even for myself, I think what would I have liked, right? I think just maybe sometimes having someone say like, wow, I can really see that this is a real thing for you, you know, and I really acknowledge that it's a hard time. And allowing someone to maybe even just share. And sometimes you don't have to really say a lot. You know, I mean, we're talking about like first steps, you know, you're not talking about the whole journey, like where to start. Just listen and acknowledge and affirm that it's not your imagination, it's not it's not a problem that will be solved overnight, you know, but that's okay. We're here, you know, to figure it out together.
Yeah, actually, I think everyone needs that kind of friend.
It's the empathy, the heart of empathy that which nobody has in this era we're living. You know, like I'm too distracted, too busy. I don't have time for myself. Even why should I have time for you? I couldn't even manage myself. So I think that's why it's not just about how I can do, it's how we can do. So that means there must be accountability by many other people for one single person. You know, like how a kid, you need a whole kampong, a whole village to take care of a kid. It's the same thing. A person going through a mental health, you need a whole community to support a person. And so I think like, you can take at this time and you can take at this time just to check in on that person. You don't need to actually be 24/7 with one person. I think by the time your mental health will be affected, you'll be so burnt out and you hate to do in this ministry anymore. So a listening heart. Like just what Fern says, all about, hey, how you doing? Just listen. That's all. Don't need you don't need to put a solution. I think I tried this method, right, and it works for me. You know, you should try it too. It's like, hopefully you ring. Is there anyway? How can I help you? Not what can this help me can help you. So that's why.
You know what I'm hearing is, you know, we might not realize this, but we might already be helping people just by asking people how they are and just listening to them. We might not even know that there's an issue, but just being present and like you said, having a listening ear, you might already be helping, and you might be thinking, hey, I'm already doing this in my Bible study group. You are helping, and that's why what we're talking about, maybe in terms of church community or just makaning together, is such a natural thing that we're already doing. So it's not really adding too much to the DNA of church, being community, loving one another. So that's very encouraging already. But I think the particular circumstance when you feel like you need to fix something, or when you feel like and you understand that pressure, because if someone is actually coming to you, hey, I have this problem, I don't know what to do, you do feel that kind of like,
you got to do something about it.
Exactly, right. And you know, what would you say to that? And I mean, I do feel that sometimes, you know, what would you say would be helpful thing to do in that kind of pressurizing environment?
I mean, that is good because he is asking for help. He's giving the open doors for you to share. If those who did not have the opportunity to ask this kind of question, then it's better not to even.
Okay.
So it's like, just how are you doing? All right. Don't worry. Good. I know it's hard, but how can I help you? But it's not like if the person is asking for help, that's an open door opportunity for you to give what kind of suggestion you have.
I wanted to say, like, I think what Lydia spoke about communities is really important, because there are times when someone might come to you and it's a really heavy issue, or it's traumatizing to you as well, or it triggers something for you as well. it might feel overwhelming for you to even like be that friend that you want to be.
Okay.
I think that kind of situation is also very real. And in that sense, that's why I also think like you also need to, I mean, if we are on the listening end, we also need to realize when we ourselves need to maybe ask another friend like, hey, this person is struggling,
I like that. Okay.
Like I really don't know what to say to them. Like I can listen, but I feel like they need more than what I can give.
Okay.
So but of course you also got to talk to that person, like, are you okay if I like kind of bring this up to someone? And I think it's community is not just one-on-one, it's really forming that support system, right? And I understand that it's very complex and all that, but and obviously all of this I speak from only from personal experience.
Okay.
I think it's been very helpful sometimes to reach out to someone else and say like, okay, this I've been friends with this person, like they're going through a really hard time and I want to be there for them, but actually it's also starting to impact me a little bit, and
Also, you as the person trying to give help, give advice, is actually affecting your own mental
and
health.
I think it can happen, especially if it's a very big issue, or if the issue is triggering my own trauma or it's my own triggers. That I think is a very real thing as well. So I think having that awareness of like your own capacity, understanding sort of like your own boundaries for safeguarding, your own well-being, and this is where I see like community is not just one-on-one, it's not an isolation of like 2 or 3 people, but it's being able to reach out. So there has to be that wider net of safety where I can go to someone else and be like, this is kind of beyond me, but it's a very real issue and I need help.
Definitely, just I think the best of all is refer to a professional.
I mean, and definitely there will come a time for that. I think we really have to be mindful that if we're not qualified, we're not there to counsel people. There's a difference between being a friend and being a counselor.
I think as a community we are not equipped to be counselor yet. We are not even certified counselors ourselves, and I think it's just more like being that first line of listening ear. If anything that's harder, that's where the professionals will come in.
Actually, is it okay that if I say that you're actually studying a course in counseling?
So yes, I'm actually, so because of that COVID and that 2019, and I felt like it's already almost 5 years in, and I think, and I still have this interest in mental health, so it might most likely is God's calling, and so I took up Bible College Malaysia,
BCM, yes,
Bible College. So they have this course, a ministerial counseling. I took the master's route, and basically they do, but this is not really a course that they train you to be licensed counselor, but more like equipping you with the biblical truths and knowing all the psychologies behind a person going through a mental health. I think it's just more like equipping the knowledge as a lay leader sense.
I see.
Like what we can do as a community, like just like around us. But anything that's even harder, like suicide, I don't think it's wise for us to handle. So it have to handle by a professional.
Actually, we've mentioned professionals a bit, and I think it's a good. Well, I think churches, on the one hand, want to be as loving and holistic as possible in ministering, and I totally respect. Churches will have certain lines whereby how much outside help they will want to rely on, and I know some churches will be okay with something like therapy. And some will maybe be a bit more hesitant in recommending that, and I totally respect that. Churches will have different views on this. I think what might be helpful is if a church maybe has a clear, they can articulate it clearly such that it isn't at the point whereby someone needs help, that then they suddenly get surprised by the answer. I think I totally respect, different people will have different takes on whether something can be helpful or not, especially in the medical profession. And some will be wholeheartedly recommending it. But it's very hard actually to tell sometimes where churches stand. And again, because it's such a new area, but because there's a rise in cases, and I think we should anticipate that this scenario will come up more and more. It might be worth just finding out what, as a church, we are comfortable endorsing, and what ways we can maybe even train our leaders, whether it's like sending them to BCM. to be more equipped.
Yeah, or having workshops invited, church members who are clinical counselors themselves to open workshops. And just to, I don't think it's not about the training, it's more about awareness right now, because I think the church we're in right now is more about the awareness.
Probably the whole thing about like having conversations is a really good start.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
It starts from that. I think it's a really good thing that at least out of COVID, probably the one thing that we can maybe see as a silver lining is that people are starting to talk a lot more about it. They are less dismissive these days, I think. A lot more awareness that this is important. This is a real thing. People do really need help. Health is not just my physical body, but it encompasses the whole person, right? So I think just being able to talk about it is already like a great step forward, I think.
Yes. Actually, that's one of the aims of even having this conversation. It's just for us to work things out, but to make it normal to actually talk about issues to do with mental health.
No stigmas,
No,
One of the things I realized, because out of COVID, I started to realize that there are issues I needed to address. Otherwise, I felt like I would never be able to move forward in the things that God has called me to. So I actually went for therapy. Pretty intensive. Like the first year was really every week. So can you imagine every week for like 1 year, almost 1 year? And it was very, very intensive in the sense that me and my counselor, we went really deep. But I was really blessed because I felt like I found a really good counselor as well. There was that connection. I trusted her. I really ended up trusting her a lot. And I think I trusted her because I felt like the way she facilitated the sessions was actually helpful. Like I could see the fruit, right? But at the end of it, I think one of the things that I realized was that going to therapy, it should be as normal as me going for my annual health checkup or my 6 months, dental checkup, that kind of thing. It should be that, because on an everyday basis, I think the way I see mental health now is not that big thing where suddenly I'm so depressed and I don't want to live anymore. I mean, that is like really, it takes, you don't go get that overnight, right? It starts from somewhere. So even just overwhelmed sometimes at work, right? Having to manage people, dealing with misunderstandings, like why you say that, that really hurt me. I think sometimes even just going to someone to be able to process that itself is mental health. And I realized that with my counselor, there were certain things, like even after I stopped seeing her for that 1 year, like 6 months in, I would go in, like I had something very big happen in my family that really shook us. And I knew that I needed to talk through this again. So I went back to her and I said, just specifically this season, this is happening, I need help. And I just need help. I just need someone to help me sort out my mental space. So normalizing it.
I don't think this would be a over lunch conversation to be any friend. Nobody. It's so intimate, it's so deep, and people rather watch it. Have you watched the latest football, Arsenal versus Man U? People, I don't know why. Why would people talk such surface level topics when they have this fear of going into the deep? We should normalize it, like you say.
That's actually really, really helpful already. Again, personal experience of something that was during a challenging time and you found it beneficial.
But it's important because of the relationship we had. Not many had a good relationship with the counselor. Like, it felt like I'm not being heard, and that's why not being heard by the counselor well, misunderstandings, and that's where a therapy will fail too. And it's good that she had a good one. Exactly. And I think again, I just want to, this is not planned again, this is just a conversation, but I just want to put a caveat that these are all personal opinions. We are not representing any church position whatsoever. I completely understand, if certain churches would maybe advocate counseling as opposed to therapy. So counseling is really just more short term, and therapy would be whereby you have maybe a licensed professional. So again, there are different grades of help.
And I think what's really useful is just to see yourself as in partnership whenever you're not the main person always
No.
Yeah,
relying on
never.
for giving help. And it can be other friends. So already that can be one source of help. But in the same way, like if you have a medical condition, someone has a toothache, you go to a dentist, and it just might be worth working out if there is something that is biological and there's an expert who's able to help with this. What resources you would be comfortable recommending? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Actually, as the last part, I wanted to talk a bit about Lydia and your research project, which is actually
Thank you.
in this area.
Yeah.
If you could tell us a bit about it and just,
Well,
where you're headed with it.
Yeah, initially my research topic is like trying to find the correlation between certain characteristics of a community that makes people are open enough to share their mental health or some mental health problems. So I think it's like whether are they, a non-judgmental community or an open, a safe space, or just listening here. And
That's
I
really
thought,
great.
It was
Wow.
initially like that. Then I thought like, we'll
change
traits.
direction already.
Yeah, if traits are,
Okay.
are very very subjective.
Okay.
It's very hard.
Okay.
So I don't know if I could even plot out a graph that's
Okay.
correlated. So I
Yeah.
thought like myself, I thought about why do we have something to do it by just being by being actively in the church community. How
Yeah.
does it help with your mental health? And I think we could
Yeah.
see the graph better.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think I'm gonna go around that route. So I don't know. So maybe it's a question I asked for you. So
Yeah.
do you think that the community had actually, bring a positive or a negative impact into your mental health, like the church community so far?
That's the thing, right? In good times, it's great having friends, but maybe it's when times are tough. And I think that is the measurable bit of when someone is going through a season, when they feel they can't handle it on their own. And I think just having the presence, it's not necessarily that people need to do anything, but knowing that you're not on your own when you're dealing with struggles. I think it just helps you to process things in a way that is not so isolated. You feel as if you have resources. You feel as if sometimes just changing topics, you don't have to just think about the problem all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. What about Fern? Your community versus your overall mental health?
Chewing again.
What's some more?
Community and mental health. I feel like I've been very blessed to be in a community that is really open to it. So the church that I go to, the church that we go to,
Yeah.
we talk about it even in SPTC in classes. Like today we're doing like trauma and safeguarding.
Oh yeah. Wait.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The third years are
Oh,
doing,
yeah,
I
okay.
think, something on trauma,
Yeah,
and we
yeah,
are doing
What's
safeguarding, which I feel like it flows in as well. So I consider myself very blessed to be in a community where these kind of discussions, I think, are really quite robust, actually. And I do acknowledge that it might be a rare thing. It's not really the norm. But at the same time, I can also see how people might be struggling in different communities. And I just feel, I think maybe if I had to say anything, I would, what I would say to the person who is struggling to feel understood in a community that is not yet quite leaning into mental health, or it's not something that is at the forefront of their awareness at this point. I think it's to maybe keep ourselves from getting to that place of anger or feeling like you want to give up on community, and it's a very, it can feel very isolating. But I think the thing about being, I think speaking from a faith point of view as well, I think is sometimes the expectations that we want from people, they can't fulfill those expectations, and I think it's really difficult. But we need to come to a place where we can also forgive and can release that.
Yeah,
And
that's
I
true.
think there is faith in also believing that God will lead us to maybe the right people to have these conversations with. So it's something like Lydia just walking into a talk by a police on suicide. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
like
yeah.
I
Okay.
mean,
like
like
there are
Infinity,
different.
yeah.
There's so many different ways that you
Yeah.
could actually meet people, and I think sometimes there's a real disappointment in not being able to get the kind of support that you want from your immediate community. But I think as Christians, the one thing I would want to say is don't get to the point where you resent
Okay.
some things that people have said and all that, because that is, no one has the answer. Everyone's learning, right? And some people, like, they say things because they don't understand, and it's not because they wanted to hurt us or whatever. But I think it's being able to just understand that it's okay if sometimes our expectations are not met, but there is that faith that God still can lead us to the right people. And I hope that that brings hope to someone, because I feel it can be a really a big struggle if you're trying to find people to understand you, but it seems like no one is understanding you.
No, like God understands you. Just leave to God. Yeah, I think it's the expectation, like we are trying to find the healing through people, but healing should be from God instead.
Okay.
So always lean back to the right source
Yeah.
of your hope.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. And I think we are seeing now situations whereby people are pulling away from community, and even where they've been maybe even hurt, because the reason for that, you see as well a desire to want to find either another form of it or maybe even to come back. And I think it's something inside of us. I mean, God has made us to be relational and to be even dependent on one another. And I think in the bad case whereby we've been dependent and we've been hurt, that too is because God has made us dependent on one another. But in the best case scenario whereby we're dependent on one another and we've been ministered to, that too is wonderful, it's fantastic. But you notice, being dependent means you have to be humbled. You need to rely on someone.
Open-minded.
And open-minded. So I think, I don't know what I'm saying. I guess I'm trying to say that being well doesn't mean that you're strong. You can deal with everything. But being well in a context of community means you have people you can trust.
Being vulnerable.
Being vulnerable.
Also
Being vulnerable.
Being true and vulnerable.
Being true. And as a process of that, you will be hurt, you'll be disappointed. But at the same time, you also be encouraged and you'll be lifted up. It's that kind of relational. Yeah.
Did that answer your question, Lydia?
Yeah, definitely. It definitely. I mean, it is the community and finding finding the right resources and not expecting you can get your answers from the community sometimes. I think it's the managing of expectations and being pointed to the right resources that will be helpful. I think that's because we are lacking in all these standard operating procedures on how to manage.
You're
and
right.
people
We're
will just
kind of like working things
just
out.
throw ball away, boom, just throw it to the pastor. He will solve everything. Pastor, ha.
You really have to feel for the pastors.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
they cannot do everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fix car, fix your heart.
Correct. Everything. Yeah.
No one has the answer. I think everyone's trying to figure this out. And I think a lot of people, like, they just genuinely have good intentions. They're not out there to hurt people, but it's just really, we are all learning. We're all learning.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is a good place to ask to close with a last word. Any last thoughts or a last word to someone who is watching this? For whatever reason, what would you want to say to them, either as someone who is interested in this topic or has been affected by it? Maybe you can start with you, Lydia.
Definitely being like what you say, being connected. At least you don't never struggle it alone, I would say. Being connected. And I think even though you cannot find the perfect community, at least being connected to someone who is able to handle, and in between, God will pull along all the help and resources you need. So just as long as your decision to be connected to the church life, I think, to follow along, and that's where your constant devotion, and then God will because of your willingness to be faithful to me, and then that's where I'll come. I will definitely help you. I'll help you out from the darkness of your life.
Yes, that's so true.
Yeah. Don't. Yeah, it's a bit hard, definitely. It's like, yeah, you lack faith, but yeah, even, prophets
Yeah.
have mental health problems as well, and to the point like, Elijah, just kill me, Lord. Yeah, that's a bit extreme, but I think, in a way, I think it's also being attentive to listen to the, we always say the gentle whisper, right, Elijah. So I think we are too distracted. And I think it's all about learning to quiet down instead of trying to look from our expectation. I want to be healed this way, but God have a different way of doing it for you. So being open, listening to His gentle whispers, and God is always there present for you. You just need to be present, still, and you can hear Him. And being grounded on the community and the truth, that's where you were able to sustain in a way.
I liked what Lydia said about, I think she said perfect community. There's no such thing as a perfect community. And honestly, in my life, and specifically as a Christian, I think for more of my Christian life, I have struggled with community rather than feel like I found the perfect place, but it's coming to a place of, and it's like a real growth process, coming to a place where you understand like everyone's on their journey. But the call as a Christian is that you're connected to God and you're connected to community. You're connected to God through community. You're connected to God through your personal relationship with Him. I think it's really that belief that no Christian should be alone that has kept me sometimes just walking through even the drier seasons of what I feel is my community life, where I've had questions, stuff like that. So I think hang in there. If I had to say anything, hang in there, and God is faithful. He's faithful to meet our needs, I think. And I think also knowing that it's okay to be in that place of struggling. There's nothing wrong with you if you feel like you're struggling in this season of your life, because we all have that seasons. We all have something that we're working out. And this is the process, I think, is part of sanctification. God's working things out in us as well in those difficult seasons, and I think it's expecting
it's of polishing the rough diamond in you.
And it's being okay with where you're at. I think even accepting the fact that you're not okay, sometimes that is needed, because I feel like sometimes we have a lot of expectations for ourselves. I shouldn't be feeling this way. I shouldn't be angry. I shouldn't be hurt. I shouldn't be sad or whatever. But actually know that there are seasons when we do feel that way, because life happens, and it's okay. It's okay to not be okay. That's a K-drama.
I haven't watched that yet. Netflix.
And I think maybe even starting with that, it's okay to not be okay. And some days it's okay that I don't feel quite a fit with my community, but I'm just going to try my best. I'm going to have faith that God will lead me through this, and understand that we're all just trying.
I think I would just say you're not alone. You're not alone, definitely, because of God. He might be closer to you than you realize. But God also uses people. And whether you might be the person trying to give that help, well, you're not alone in giving that help. But especially if you're the one who is dependent and looking for it, or saying, where's it? What can I find it? Well, there are seasons like that. But ultimately, again, God is always with you. And don't be surprised if God brings people alongside you. Maybe not even to help, but just to journey along. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Wow, okay. I hope it helps. Okay. Thanks for listening as well. Take care. Bye.